Hey everybody, welcome to my new channel. I reposted the Pachinki video that I had up on After Hours here as well, just because that's the kind of channel this is going to be. It's going to be paintings that I'm doing sped up like this, either from video games or just things that I want to paint, and I didn't really figure there was a spot for it on After Hours. There wasn't a spot for it on the highlight channel, but I want to do this kind of content, so rather than annoy people who just want to watch me make jokes and play video games, I figured, okay, I'm just going to make a separate channel, and that should be fine. So if you want that kind of content, if you want video games, I'll have a link to my highlights channel at the end of this video. If you want full streams from me, I'll have a link to that at the end of the video. If you want to watch the Pachinki video, there'll be a link to that at the end of the video. Or if you want to subscribe to this channel in order to support me continuing to do this, there'll be a link to that at the end of this video. But anyway, this is a story from my life that I wanted to tell, and figured I'd go ahead and have this video in addition to the Pachinki one, so that way you have a general idea of what this channel is going to be like. This one, obviously, because it's Halloween, basically. I meant for this to come out on Halloween, but then I just didn't really have time, so whatever. Anyway, so I used to be a ghost hunter, like I said, and bear in mind, future videos will not be spooky like this. Most of them will be random stories from my life that I feel like telling. But I used to be a ghost hunter because I wanted to know what happened after you died. I figured, okay, you've got all these religions that tell you this, that, and the other, and even an atheist belief that, after death there is the same thing that there was before life. There is nothing, and that is comforting. There's comfort in that. There is comfort in the idea of heaven and hell. There's comfort in the thought of hell, because you know that if you are a good enough person, the bad people go to hell, you know? And that's cool. That's great. That feels good to us, you know? And that's why we believe in it. And we believe in stuff like reincarnation. All of this stuff is comforting, but that is not the way that I feel like I should process the world. What is comforting? I want to process what is actually happening. And if I can actually go and see a ghost for real, first off, that's a special experience that most people don't get. And second off, I get to prove that to myself. Even if I can't prove it to other people, I know in my heart of hearts that there is something beyond just life. Now, that being said, if you think you have a ghost, I'll tell you right now, you can save a little bit of money by getting a mouse trap or getting a CO2 detector, because chances are you have a mouse, a rat, or you have a CO2 leak. You do not have a ghost. You do not have an Amityville horror situation going on. You have principally nothing happening. Nothing that would be normally considered as supernatural. You have very mundane things happening, and I'm very sorry. There were people who used to get mad at us about that we wouldn't find their ghost, and they wanted to have like an Amityville horror sort of bed and breakfast. I had a couple of people who wanted to do that, and luckily, because we didn't charge, they couldn't sue us for not finding anything. It was a very bizarre situation, and I gotta apologize, I'm not the best storyteller, so I'll do my best. But we showed up to this little middle of nowhere town in Texas. It was close by to Austin. It's somewhere between Austin and, I guess, Temple. I kind of forgot. If you're not from Texas, understand that Texas is bigger than some countries. It is a big state with about 3 cities that actually matter. There's Austin, Houston, and Dallas. In between that, there's basically nothing. And in the basically nothing, there have to be gas station towns. Towns that their entire purpose is to get you gas so you can drive somewhere else in Texas or out of Texas. Now, so the family that had called us in had called into the head office. We were basically part of this collection of ghost hunting groups, and they had told us to go and take care of this because it was close enough to Austin that we could go take care of it. When we got there, we noticed a couple of things. First off, if you're gonna set a horror sort of movie somewhere, this house is a really good choice, and it's good idea because this house is for sale last time I checked, and I haven't checked since I left. They were selling it because they were so convinced of what they had seen that they had left the house. They had left their possessions in it, and they were fixing to move as if there was a flood or a fire. They were not going back into that house for any reason. And the story goes that the husband had been attacked. When he was coming home, he walked into the living room, and from the lobby into the living room, something had pounced on him and tackled him to the ground, not only scaring him, but also harming him, scratching up his arms. I figured most likely he had a heart attack or a stroke, or the guy at the gas station when we went to get our gas, as you do in a gas station town, had theorized that there was a mistress involved, and he didn't want his family to find out, so rather than deal with it, he made up this story, and then it would be a reason for them to leave. They had one kid who was, I guess, a boy based on his bedroom. When we did our walkthrough, obviously without them, they were so afraid of the place that they would not even do the walkthrough with us. They had to actually tell most of the story to us on site from their F-150 that they had parked up on the main road. They would not even drive down the drive to the house, which was, cracking in paint. And, if it weren't the site of supposed haunting, would be a great place to live, honestly. It had a main foyer area that led to the stairs that you could go up, or to the living room. The stairs, obviously, would lead you to the boy's bedroom. The living room, where he had been attacked, had a nice, decent-sized TV, and led you around towards the dining room, where they had their pet turtle, which had sadly died because it had been left for the last couple of days, maybe day, since they had called us. And then that led around to the kitchen, and then from the kitchen to the main bedroom. There's a couple bathrooms in there, but pretty much a very simple layout. They had a chicken coop, which looked like it was mismanaged and probably was there prior to them moving in, and they didn't ever use it. During my first sweep of the house, which I had to do by myself, and well, let me explain. Normally, when you're doing ghost hunting, you do it with someone else, so that way you can have someone else to corroborate your claims. You aren't just saying, I saw this, I heard that, and you have someone to kind of ground you. Now, unfortunately, we had to go a few people short because a couple people chickened out. They said, I had nightmares of this place since I was a little kid. Yeah, sure, it looks like every horror movie house ever. It is creaky, it is rickety, it is a horror movie kind of house. I get it. But anyways, I begin my first walkthrough, and I don't notice anything really too strange. The smell of the turtle was probably the most alarming part of it. The dining room had a patio that led out, so you could go and look out into the chicken coop. And so when I was passing through, I could see the couple of people who had, begun setting up for the chicken coop. I was the first person to go in. The boy had a black-green deck, I remember, from Magic the Gathering in his bedroom. It was not very good. It was too many cards, to be honest, but I shouldn't be throwing shade at the family. Anyway, I exit and I do my report. I had done all the normal EMF detector stuff, and I had done the recordings in case if we saw anything in the minor bits of audio that we sometimes pick up, which I honestly think is just the reel having a little bit of a squeak or something, and then we attribute it to a voice. I think it's a little bit of bunk science, but other people in the group always treat it as if it was the best thing ever. Anyway, I don't know what to call her, not girlfriend's person I was interested in, she was sort of kind of interested in me, asked me if I had brought the thing that she'd given me. And I remember this because she was so insistent on it. Every single time we'd go out on one of these hunts, she would ask me, did you bring the thing I gave you? And she had these like trinkets. She was very spiritually inclined, I should say, which was a weird fit for me, being as rationally minded as I was at that point. She would always have something, some necklace, some little, I don't know, something or other that she had blessed for the specific occasion. And she was especially freaked out by this one because she had seen the man's arms, I guess, or had at least heard about the damage that whatever this thing had done to him was enough to scare her. And so I accepted it because I was raised right. I was told that when someone gives you a gift, you accept it. You don't just say no. And also because kind of it was a sort of a thing, and I was trying to make it a thing. Listen, I don't claim to be perfect, okay? Anyway, I brought it with me because of that. And I did have it on me when I was walking through the house, and I didn't notice anything, and I didn't hear anything other than, maybe a squeak or something out of place that sounded like it was probably just a floorboard. A couple more people went in, did their runs, and I did my walkthrough of the chicken coop. There was absolutely nothing of value to talk about there. It was a decrepit chicken coop. If you've ever been in a chicken coop, just imagine that. But imagine that the chickens have left their own malice there. That's not really a ghost, that's just chickens are awful. Anyway, I go back, I have some hot chocolate, and then I take my second turn at the house. We go in waves, so that way we can report back and again get grounded. So I go back through and I do my second run. And something I do want to say I did notice and perhaps did notice on the first run but didn't want to admit, was that the fact that my flashlight, we obviously turn off the power to the house so that way the electromagnetic field device picks up a correct reading. You know, the theory with that, the EMF detector, is that if there are ghosts, they will try and sap the electricity out of things, and if you have the power on, it's going to make a false positive. So we bring flashlights with us because it doesn't usually pick up enough of a signal that the EMF detector will actually show anything. One thing I did notice that was weird, and it was probably, I said to myself, just my own nerves speaking, was that the shadows seemed to be denser than usual. Perhaps it was just because it was overcast, though it wasn't. Perhaps it was just because the house was so well insulated and had so few windows, but it wasn't. They had a window leading out from the dining room, so there should have been some light, some sort of extra light, but it seemed like that the light from the flashlight had a difficult time piercing through what existed in that house. It seemed as if the shadows were longer and thicker than made sense. You know, in this painting that I'm doing right now, you'll notice that I'm using black in the background. That is a cardinal sin of basic painting. You don't use black because black does not exist in nature, but I will tell you that black existed in this house. The shadows were not just dark, it was pitch black. There was no light being sent to those spots. It was as if light was in an absence in those areas where the light was not touching. There is always light. There is ambient light. The light from a street light outside, a light from the stars at night, the light from, you know, just the side of a flashlight is still light hitting it, however minor. You always have light unless if you're underground in a cave or in a completely sealed room. You will always have some light, but in this house it seemed as if it was a cave. It seemed as if there was absolutely no light possible. My second walk through the house was about the same. I just sort of ignored most of the stuff that was going on that I would explain or someone else would freak out about. I would explain that those things were nothing, that I wasn't seeing anything, that the shadows were as normal as possible. But when I walked into the living room, ready to walk my way out, and I stopped to look at the TV, which was a very nice TV for the time. It was one of those big old chunky CRT TVs, but it was a large one. Keep in mind, this was about 10 years ago, so that was a fairly decent TV. It was huge. I was a little bit admiring it and also kind of wanting to just go home and play video games as I kind of normally do, when I noticed that there was something out of the corner of my eye. Based on the color and the speed, I assumed that it was a coyote. You know, there was a door that led out of the dining room, and the smell of the turtle probably attracted some sort of wild animal. As I turned to face it, I realized that what I was facing was not an animal, but in fact, something entirely else. It was something that was about 3 or 4 feet tall and stood in the doorway of the dining room, facing me. It wore a pink dress, as you see here, and it had its facial features I cannot get right, but its facial features did seem like they were stretched over a head not big enough to contain them. Its eyes were pitch black. It was, again, as if light could not enter its recesses, and to this day, I do not know if what I saw had eyes, but it smiled at me. It looked at me, and it smiled, and my heart stopped, my breathing stopped, and it mimicked that. And I realized then and at that moment that it was not breathing. Whatever it was very much trying to imitate what I was doing. It was trying to pretend as if it could breathe, but it did not know naturally what that was supposed to look or even feel like. It did over-exaggerated breathing motions. Its face and skin texture, which I could easily misidentify as a coyote out of the corner of my eye, were as if they were made by roadkill. It was not a natural creature that I saw in that doorway. It was not a natural thing that existed in that house. And it stared at me, and I stared at it, and there was nothing to be done but to leave. I did my best to keep my eye on it, but it just stared at me and turned to look at me as I left. And when I left, I didn't tell anyone because there was, how do you explain that? They're all so ready to be the people who find the next Amityville horror, that you don't want to be the people, you don't want to tell them that there's something there, but I just assumed it had to have been a CO2 leak. Like I said before, CO2 can cause you to have paranoia and even hallucinations if it is a high enough amount. Maybe that explains the shadows. Maybe that explains everything. So I calmed myself down and I had some hot chocolate and I just relaxed. I didn't tell anyone. We played a round of poker. A couple more people went in, and it was only later that someone came out the front door and shouted to us, "Hey, I got something." And then that's when those thoughts of that thing that I saw came back, and so I brought the CO2 detector with me. If you've never seen one, it's sort of like a fire detector. It makes the same sort of sounds. I brought it with me, fully expecting that if there was something in that house, if he had actually picked up on something, that this thing would go off, that it was just a CO2 leak. It was just a CO2 leak or a badger or something, but there was nothing there. The CO2 detector did not go off. The EMF detector that he had did, and he was asking it questions, and it would move in relationship to it. If he asked it a yes or no question, and he asked, it said, move the needle if yes. His questions revealed the following answers. Whatever was communicating with him said it was a 3-year-old girl who was very confused about why there were people in its house. After that, we packed up and left. That was enough evidence for them. They didn't see the thing that I had seen, and I didn't want to tell them about it because, I don't know, I still wasn't sure at that point that that's what I had seen. Didn't tell the girl that I was driving home about it either. She was more of a talker than a listener, but I'll tell you this much. The shadows seemed to be impossibly thick and long all the way home. And more than that, at one point on the way home, I saw something as if it were a shadow made solid standing in the road in the shape of a human being that had moved out of the way as we drove close. And to this day, I do not know what that was, but I have at least this answer. There is something after death. I do not know what it is. The moral of the story is, do your best to survive for as long as you can, because whatever happens after you die is not friendly. Here's another painting that I did, hopefully a little bit closer. I feel like that one was better. This was the first one I did, and I mistaked the color of its skin, I think, because when I used my flashlight, it tinted it blue. Here's an example of me trying to use a flashlight on the painting that I finish. You'll notice how its skin turns a little bit blue because of the flashlight's light. I think in actuality, its skin was probably closer to this weird tan. Anyway, here's me signing it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, you can pick up a print of it on my website, or you can contact me if you want to buy it. My girlfriend wants them gone, so she'd probably be happy if you would go ahead and buy them. And also check out this the Pachinki video that I did, and check out my video game channels. One's for streams, one's for highlight videos of those streams. I hope you enjoyed. Have a good day. I'll see you next time. Bye!